will begin with a quick introduction into the grid and how it functions. We'll dive into grid constraints and how do we deal with those when looking to obtain a grid connection for our generation project. We'll look at the connections process itself. So what applications are available, what are the steps required to obtain the connection, and then we'll look at the new connections process reforms recently put into place. So what's changed and how does it benefit the community energy projects? We'll have a 10-minute break, and then we'll be welcoming our guest speaker from Northern Powergrid, who will come in to talk about their community energy team and will provide useful insights about the connections process from their perspective of the DNO. I think it'll be quite informative. We'll also be looking to have an interactive workshop task. So we'll have a chance to discuss and apply the knowledge we've learned today, or already know. And we'll finish off with a Q&A session. And feel free to stay and ask any questions. All good, hopefully. Okay. So, first of all, I'd like to begin with some introductions. We'd like to know a little bit more about you. So a quick intro into what we'll be representing, what you're working on. I recognize some faces from the previous workshops, so a quick recap will do. I think it'll be easiest if I nominate some names as they appear on the list. So I'll just begin with me. So Fiona is first.
Yes, I'm Fiona Steed. I represent Tockwith Community Energy. We are a group of volunteers in a small village about 10 miles west of York. We are almost, in the next few days, about to submit an application for funding, stage 2 development funding for a project in our village. The project after that will be the one that will require the grid connection. Hence why I'm here today.
So thank you, and hopefully you will learn a lot here today. Next we have Helge.
Hi, I'm Helge Ødal. I live in Otley, North Leeds, and Otley 2030 is involved in both retrofit and energy projects. I did work for National Grid in the past and have been at the other end of connections as I was generation performance manager looking after generator connections all around Great Britain in the noughties. Thank you.
Thank you, Helge. Thank you. Next we have John. Is John here?
Hi, can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Good, excellent. I was having a little bit of problem with my microphone, but it seems to be okay now. Yeah, my name is John Riedel. I'm from recently started volunteering for Todmorden Community Energy, which is in West Yorkshire, right in the middle of the Pennines, just near the Lancashire border. We're starting to look at the early stages of a possible hydro scheme locally, and I'm just really trying to find out as much as I can on how the whole process might work. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, John. Next we have Liz.
Hi, I'm Liz. I work for a not-for-profit organisation called the Rural Design Centre up in the northeast of England. We've got a couple of community energy projects going, linking community hubs like village halls and sports centres, quite a lot of churches as well, and we're doing the fundraising to install solar panels and batteries into these individual buildings and then linking them together with a community benefit society cooperative to manage all of the procurement and the risk and the process and the insurance and also the financial and energy flow transactions. We're looking to replicate that across County Durham at the moment as well, and then sort of hopefully build it into a bigger Northeast region community energy cooperative, and looking at talking to some of the other regions as well to sort of share our approach. But the final grid connection is still a bit that I find tricky, so I'm here to learn a bit more about that.
Okay, wonderful, quite comprehensive. Thank you for that. Michelle and Rachel. Rachel?
Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm from the Professional Energy People. I've just started in the role as BDM. We're energy consultants based in Yorkshire, but we cover the whole of the UK. And I'm basically here to learn a little bit more about processes so I can help our clients going forward and know what we're doing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Rosa? Is Rosa here?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you
Hello,
fine.
hi. Sorry, I've got
Hello.
problems with my camera, I think.
That's-
So I'm from Canopy Housing in Leeds, and we're a community retrofit and homeless housing small project. And we are doing a feasibility study on introducing renewable energy to our properties, and looking at how we can support people on prepayment meters to benefit from renewable energy, and looking at extreme poverty, fuel poverty.
Wonderful. Thank you. Next we have Timothy.
Hello, I work for both the Methodist Church and the Anglican Church in Yorkshire, and it's my job to decarbonise church buildings, but also to link up with local community energy organisations and schemes and integrate church buildings with them.
Okay, wonderful. That's good to hear. And finally, we have Walt.
Yeah, hi, I'm Walt Trelaw. Got a number of different people I'm representing, but I guess mainly York Community Energy and Leeds Community Energy. We've got a number of projects underway at different stages. I've had a little look for York around grid connection, but I'd like to know more about that. Hence here. Okay.
Okay, wonderful. Nice and easy. It's good to see everyone, old and new faces. So a little bit about C before we begin. We are community and local energy specialists. Our main work is in the community energy sector, and we work to deliver energy and low carbon projects that are community led, owned, and managed. We operate as a social enterprise, so we actively invest in supporting community energy across the UK. Really, our work involves every stage of the process, from initial feasibility assessments all the way to operation and product management throughout. We also work with all types of groups and organizations, so charities, for example, community groups, landowners, the government. It's a varied sector, really. Next, we have a little bit about the funders of this program, the North East and Yorkshire Net Zero Hub. I'll be covering this as there is no hub representative in the room at the moment. So the North East and Yorkshire Net Zero Hub is one of 5 regional net zero hubs in England, and they're funded by the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero. The focus mainly lies on growing the net zero sector through investing and attracting investment. This includes community-led low carbon energy generation projects. Another thing they work on is training and increasing capacity and knowledge. So essentially, events and workshops that can upskill and educate in the low carbon sector, very much like this one. The hub is also partnering with us to deliver a series of online surgery sessions to accompany these workshops. The surgeries are one-to-one sessions hosted by C, and basically give you a chance to ask questions and discuss your own project. You can choose a time and date that suits you best, and we'll share the link to that later. A quick overview of the Great British Energy Community Fund, their mouthful. This has replaced the Community Energy Fund, and they are responsible for the funding of community energy projects. So they provide grants for urban and rural communities to develop low carbon energy projects. This funding is available at different stages of the project. So this can be whether you're looking to undergo a feasibility study or having an investment grade scheme, both. Applications are open until the 12th of November this year, and funding is awarded on a first come, first served basis. So if you are going to apply, I would suggest applying as soon as possible, really. Moving on to the community energy team at the hub. Abby is the community energy lead at the hub, with Sue and Emma as senior development and project officers. If you'd like to get in touch with the team, you can use the inquiries email on screen. Alternatively, other members of staff are also available, and these are more responsible for regional support. So no matter where you are based, you have a contact that you can reach out to with any specific inquiries. So with introductions out of the way, we can begin, and there's no better place to start with than introducing the grid, or how they work mainly. So first of all, let's take a look at the basic elements of the power grid from start to end. Electricity is generated by generators, so gas, solar, wind, and it's then transported through the transmission network at very high voltages, taken across long distances, then moving through the distribution network, where it's stepped down to lower voltages. Electricity then moves to the local level through a distribution system, where it's supplied to consumers, so homes, businesses, and so on. Let's take a closer look at the two networks. So the transmission network operates at extra high voltage. So that's 275 and 400 kilovolts in England and Wales. And then in Scotland, it's 132 kilovolts. This is done to minimize the loss of power when transporting across long distances from generator to consumer. So between Scotland and England, for example. The distribution network operates at a lower voltage as it moves to the local level. So this can range from 132 kilovolts all the way down to 6.6. Voltages are stepped up and down substations. So specifically, these are nodes known as grid supply points and volt supply points. And these are used to move voltage levels higher or lower between transmission and distribution network levels. Another big difference between these two networks is that the transmission network is operated by the national grid, while the distribution network is split into 6 regional groups, or 6 regional zones to be exact, and each operated by a different distribution network operator, or DNO. The local DNO for the Northeast and Yorkshire zone is, as you know, Northern Powergrid. When entering the world of grid connections, you will hear phrases like grid constraints and network reinforcement. The bigger the scale of your project, the more relevant this becomes. So essentially, grid constraints are limitations present in the power grid that reduce the capacity to transport electricity safely and efficiently. If too much power is transported, essentially, what was it? So grid constraints, there are limitations present in the power grid that reduce its capacity to transport electricity efficiently. So there's too much power transmitted in the constrained substation wire. This could be a problem. This can cause an overload in the asset and can cause damage. So as a result, grid operators may inform the developer when there is grid constraint, and you'll have to work around that when you're designing your grid connection. So the standard solution to a grid constraint is to conduct reinforcement work on the constrained asset. So this can range from installing new additional circuits, new underground cables or overhead wires, and depending on the scale of work required, this could be quite costly for the grid operator. And if the reinforcement was triggered by a request from the developer, the cost may partially fall back on the developer to cover expenses. So to start this, is that the cost of upgrade works won't just be covered by the first applicant towards applying for a grid connection. It will also fall back on every future developer who seeks a connection to the grid at that very point. And then the early developer will be reimbursed, essentially. So these are referred to as second comer charges. A grid connection between the generation development and the grid can be of 2 types. It's non-firm or firm, depending on the headroom or the available capacity to export in that particular substation. So the main difference here is that an array with a firm connection can always export at its full connection capacity, while a non-firm connection, on the other hand, indicates that the array cannot export the generated energy at its full capacity, and this is forced by constraints facing the grid. What this means is that non-firm connections may force the development to reduce or curtail the power it's exporting at certain times to avoid overloading the grid. So this translates to a loss in export revenue. So why would we consider this? Why is this considered a good option at times? Well, when you're looking to connect to constrained networks, you'll be needing to pay typically large sums to reinforce the grid to your liking. And opting for a non-firm connection allows you to sort of sidestep that stage. So you can basically save both time and costs for your connection and avoid reinforcement costs. If you are going down the non-firm connection route, there are two main options to consider to curtail the power export of a generator. So the first one here is called active network management. What this is a system that automatically curtails connected generators when the network is at risk of overload. Now, how this works is that generators are ranked in a queue based on the time of connection to that particular substation, referred to as the last in, first off principle. So when these constraints appear in the grid, or higher power generators are exporting power at a high level, the system will then instruct a generator that connects later to reduce export until it's safe. So that way your generator will export at the full agreed capacity, except when it's really necessary to not do so. So, however, while this option offers higher revenue, it does come at a higher cost to set up, and this can be seen as a bit of a risk for investors. On the other hand, the second option here is it's called the G100 export limitation, and this is a simpler option. So instead of curtailment based on system conditions, it's simply a firm limit that is placed on the export of a generator to an agreed maximum amount, and you do it using control equipment. So for example, for your development, you put a maximum of 100 kilowatts to be exported. So any generation over this limit will then either be consumed locally or not at all. Now, obviously, this guarantees less revenue because there's no up or down, but it's a cheaper option and it's more suitable for smaller developments or where you expect higher levels of curtailment in that particular connection point. So moving on to that is, what is the grid connection process? So when should you seek a grid connection? What are the required steps to obtain it? And how is the connection process changing this year? See that. So, quite obviously, the main motivator behind setting up the grid connection for a generator is to give you access to generating export revenue. This can come about through the Smart Export Guarantee Scheme for the SEG. This comes with your electricity provider, or through agreeing a power purchase agreement with energy supply partners or local off-takers. So this comes to a virtual power supply. By contrast, if the generator is supplying power to local consumer, such as yourself, and you're expecting most of, or almost all, or all of the energy to be consumed on site, then probably you can avoid the need of setting up the connection. This is because, as we've seen, connections can come at high cost, depending on how big or small the project is. Therefore, this decision really depends on your business model and how the financials guide your thinking. But it is always good to check beforehand and get a rough idea of how much it will cost to set up the connection before making a yes or no decision, which we will see now, actually. So how would you go about connecting and obtaining grid connection for a generation project? Well, before you apply, you should conduct some initial scoping into what and how you're going to proceed. So if you're installing generation with low capacity, so about 3.9 kilowatts or less for a single phase generator, or 11 kilowatts for a three-phase system, which is the usual. Then you'll only need what's called a G98 application. These are free of charge and more straightforward to undertake. But community energy projects are typically of a much larger scale, which means you will need a G99 certification, which we'll look at what that entails in a bit. The other thing that you should look at here is to get your budget estimate from the GNO. Now, obtaining this provides you a rough idea of how much it will cost to connect. It's a non-binding value, so it's not concrete, and you might get charged a higher or lower after the DNO then proceeds to conduct a more thorough analysis of your site, but it's a rough, essentially, value of how much will it cost. Once you proceed to the application stage, you will then likely require the following items to submit a G99 application. So first you have a complete G99 application form, and then alongside that, you will need a site plan showing the point of connection and a proposed metering location. And then as well, you have an engineering design plan, a preliminary project timeline, and the heads of terms of an agreement with the landowner, if you require that. Once you're happy with your application pack, you can submit that to the DNO and pay the connection offer expenses. There's a price guide for these expenses on the website. The fee does scale with complexity and site generation, to just bear that in mind. After submission, the DNO's engineers will assess your network capacity, the fault levels, and whether you require any reinforcement, and then they will prepare a connection offer. This offer will include details of firm versus non-firm or curtailable exports, as well as what the connection and reinforcement costs are, and what your position in the queue is, and a rough connection window. Your place in the queue and how quick you connect does depend on your ability to meet certain milestones set out by the DNO. So make sure the required consents are secured accordingly, like planning permission, waiving any street work permits. This is part of the new large-scale grid connection reforms which are underway. These prioritize so-called shovel-ready schemes. Essentially, if you're ready to connect, then these are prioritized first. And these reforms will be changing sort of the grid connection process entirely. And we're looking at that actually in a moment now. So why are these reforms? Why are they happening? And how are they relevant to community energy? Well, the UK's power grid was built to handle supply coming from centralized generators, so like gas, coal, power stations. And the shift from this to a decentralized supply, like solar and wind, is only increasing pressure on the grid. This is alongside increasing power demand, which is set to increase in the UK by 50% by 2035. So in December of last year, the government unveiled its Clean Power Action Plan for 2030. And what this entails is it requires large deployment of renewable energy projects at a large scale. This deployment, unfortunately, is really bottlenecked by the process of connecting the projects to the grid. So customers apply are receiving connection dates well into the 2030s, and those who have applied will probably tell you a similar thing. To explain the scale of this, NESO estimates that there's about 739 gigawatts of generation and storage projects stuck in the queue, which is 4 times the amount, the capacity required to meet the UK's 2030 goals without by the action plan, and enough to meet the 2050 net zero targets. Prior to the reforms, connections were set up on a first come, first served basis, where projects are prioritized based on simply when they applied to connect and when the date of connection offer is. What this has done is really this has allowed unviable speculative generation projects to block more promising developments that are ready for connection, which has just caused significant delays and increasing grid costs. So instead, these new reforms seek to progress projects that are well prepared for grid connection, and they're more aligned with the UK's clean power goals. So essentially, we're replacing the first come, first connected principle with the first ready and needed first connected model. To this end, the reforms introduced this new gate-based queue system, along with two criteria to assess every application based on the readiness and the suitability of the application. And then each application is then placed into one of two positions. So if you're in gate one, this is where applicants do not demonstrate both readiness and alignment with the Clean Power Plan. So here you only receive an indicative connection date and you won't receive a set connection offer. But if you do satisfy both criteria, you can be progressed to gate two, where you receive a connection date, a connection point, and a queue position. So the reforms put forward by NASO are designed to boost the growth of the renewable energy sector and meet the UK's clean power goals. So projects are deemed vital to these goals, to maintaining grid stability, to reducing grid constraints. These projects will be enabled. So as a result, all projects that are trying to connect the transmission network, so for example, large-scale generation, they fall under the new connection process, as do all distribution connected projects that are over the transmission impact assessment threshold. So this stands at around 5 megawatts for England and Wales, and only 200 kilowatts for Scotland. The government's strategy, which is detailed in the action plan, so guides this approach to deliver the clean power objectives. And one of the things that sets out is ambition to grow the community energy sector significantly. So we're currently at about 400 megawatts in 2025, and it wants to take that to 8,000 megawatts by 2030. It's quite a jump. The reforms we're talking about, they're already accelerating the rollout of community energy projects. So, for example, this TIA threshold that we're discussing, this was only recently increased to 5 megawatts, up from 1 megawatt. And as a result, all generation projects under this threshold are exempt from the gate-based connections process. So you can essentially proceed with lower hassle and less waiting times. However, even community energy projects that must pass through the new connections process can obtain an earlier connection date. So projects that demonstrate readiness, so whether you're securing your land rights, whether you're progressing your planning application, if you do that, you can secure a connection date. So if you meet this criteria, even local projects can bypass the queue and skip ahead of larger stalled developments. So what we could do here is we could take a 5-minute break if this is suitable for everyone. I think I've probably skipped, been doing quite well, I think, regarding time. So we can either move on to the special spot for Northern Powergrid, or we can take a 5-minute break here. I'm happy with both, to be honest. So I guess a big thumbs up if you're looking to take a 5-minute break. Okay. So I guess we'll take a 5-minute break. What we could do is we can convene back in 5 minutes, and then we'll just listen to speak from Northern Powergrid, give a brief presentation about who they are, what their role is in the connections process, and they'll give some useful contacts for anyone looking to get in touch with the grid connections. If everyone's happy, wonderful. I guess I'll see you all in 5 minutes. So 38 past. So
Hi,
Michelle, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
All good? Waiting for
I'm
everyone
just
else
checking,
to.
are you doing the slide changes for me?
I am, it seems I am.
If I do, I'll just go next.
Yeah, that's fine. That works, I think. Just waiting for everyone else to rejoin.
I'm just hoping the internet connection keeps up because I'm not on an office. I'm in a random office and the connection's not amazing. So
That's fine. The only thing we know is that there's no rush here. Welcome back, Rachel.
Hi, I'm back.
Hello, Walt. Where's okay, we're seeing more rejoins now. I'll give that a minute, I think. Okay, I think we can begin. And we will begin with a guest speaker from Northern Powergrid. So with me here is Michelle, who will sort of take us into a bit about who Northern Powergrid are, what the community energy team is, and how they sort of carry out the connections process from the perspective of their DNO. So, as we covered, Michelle, when we click next.
thank you for
So,
that. So yeah, so I'm Michelle Newman. I'm one of the community energy advisors for Northern Powergrid. We are a newly formed team, but I have worked for Northern Powergrid for over 20 years. So I do have quite a lot of industry experience in varying different roles. So basically the point of me being here today is, as was said, is to just go through in a little bit more detail about who Northern Powergrid are, where the community energy team sits in that, and just some further information about the connections process. The community energy team themselves aren't experts in connections. The connections team are a separate team to ourselves, but we can provide assistance in helping customers fill in application forms and also bridging the communication gap, because I think that's one of the sticking points, is often not being able to speak to the correct person or be able to direct questions to the correct people to get the answers as quickly as you need them. So that's where we can help out with the connections process. So yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, so as has previously been said, Northern Powergrid are the electricity distribution company for the northeastern Yorkshire. So we cover everything from just past Holy Island down to North Lincolnshire. And the simplest way to look at it is, if National Grid are your motorways, Northern Powergrid cover your A and B roads. We essentially move power from National Grid to the meter outside of your home or your business. You will never get a bill from Northern Powergrid. That will come from your supplier, and your supplier picks up that power at the point we leave it at the meter and takes it into the property. We are a 24-hour company, so we keep the power on 24 hours a day, and if anything goes wrong with that, we would always be here to make sure that whatever it is has gone wrong is fixed. And we are a highly regulated business, so we're regulated by Ofgem, the government regulator, and it's just mainly to ensure fairness across the industry. Next, please. So the next slide just shows in a bit further detail that movement of power. Where this is starting to change is essentially in the old days, power was moved from, as I said, from National Grid through to Northern Powergrid through to the home. We're now seeing a change in that model as more and more customers and more groups start to generate their own power, and this is feeding back into the grid, or it's staying separate to the grid because they're using battery storage and things. So that model is changing, and we are seeing it's going to be vast changes within the next few years. We're going to see, I believe, those changes pick up massively. Next slide, please. And again. So we're a team of 4 people within the community energy team. There's myself as one of the community energy advisors, as I've said, my colleague Sabia, who does a similar job to me as an advisor. There's Liam Granville, who is the community energy project manager, and then Jack Howell, who is the community energy coordinator. But we all work together across the team. We bring together various different strengths and weaknesses. Liam is a qualified engineer, so he brings our engineering side of things. Sabia has worked all over the world for the UN, creating carbon reduction plans. I bring my industry experience from the time that I've been with Northern Powergrid, and Jack is our financial man. He's good with the figures. So collectively, we do have quite a large knowledge base. Next slide, please. So, as I've said, we're a newly formed team. The team was originally established in January, but actually we didn't all come together until May of this year. And we were brought together to support the development and successes of community energy projects and ensure that they keep the ownership of those to themselves. We are here solely from a support and information purposes. We have no ownership over community energy teams at all. We're a free service. The way we approach the support we give is via a 3 core pillar system. So we offer training. So what we've essentially done is we have mapped out the entire community energy project process, and we have built training modules for each aspect of that process. We've done this in a bite-sized way, so the modules are about 15 to 20 minutes long, and community groups can access those, as many of those as they like, and build it into a training course that they feel suits. Or if it's just a case that they need 1 module or 2 modules, they can happily just access those. We also work with groups on engagement. Now that can be from a networking point of view, so we can step in and help them network with other groups. Or it can be if they're looking to get the rest of the community on board. So we will go in and present information with regards to community energy to groups in a very simplified, plain English way. And we also hold forums ourselves, the first of which went ahead last week in Bradford and Durham, to grow the brand of community energy. And then we do have, we offer guidance and support as well. So we've got a number of guidance documents and signposting documents, which we do also share with groups too. Next slide, please. So where does community energy generation fit with the connections process? So most community energy projects that are trying to generate electricity will need to connect to the electricity network, and they usually form into 1 of 2 categories. So there's those that create an infrastructure for households and businesses to install microgeneration or low carbon technologies on their premises through bulk buying and connecting schemes, and single larger projects, which usually are funded by a combination of grants, share offers or other funding methods. And these are often projects such as solar, wind and hydro, and often have a higher capital requirement. So usually groups will fall into 1 of those 2. Next slide, please. Now, it's not always known that Northern Powergrid don't have to carry out the entire connections process. We can do, and obviously we do the majority of them, but there are many independent connections providers known as ICPs, which can carry out the work on your behalf. Any works that an ICP can carry out are known as contestable works, and where Northern Powergrid may have to step in if there are reinforcement work required on the network to allow the connection to take place, or maybe have to step in for the final connections piece, you can gain a quote from an independent connections provider as well. So we always advise is to shop around to maybe seek advice from an independent connections provider as well as Northern Powergrid. And if you do go to an ICP, they will provide you 1 quote which covers any work that Northern Powergrid need to do as well. You won't need to then get 2 quotes off us. But it is within your rights to shop around and get the best price available. If you were to go onto our website, we do offer more information on independent connections providers, and there are lists on there depending upon where you are and where's available. Next slide, please. So there are several agreements and contracts that need to be in place prior to the energisation of the connection, and we would always recommend that you seek professional assistance if you're in any doubt on these. They cover three main areas, the first of which is the connection agreement itself. So when you request a connection from us, once that connection becomes live, then you do enter into a connection agreement with Northern Powergrid, and this includes the rights and obligations for both sides, both as us as a DNO, but also as the person that's connecting onto the grid. There's also way leaves and consents which need to be taken into consideration. So depending upon the type of connection that you require and whether it's overhead or underground, we may need third-party land consents, and these can be done via easements or way leaves or land transfers, and need to obviously be established and confirmed prior to energisation. You also may need things like planning consents and obviously things to do with environmental restrictions, again, all of which needs to be in place before the connection can be energised. These are the type of things that are going to hold up the connections process, and quite often these are the things that Northern Powergrid or an ICP don't have any control over, because we are subject to third parties. So it's always worth bearing those in mind. And then finally, if you did decide to go with an ICP rather than Northern Powergrid, at the point before the energisation takes place, you would have to have an adoption agreement signed off. And that is just because Northern Powergrid would need to adopt any equipment that the ICP was wanting to put onto the network, just so that we would adopt those newly constructed assets onto our network, and that is a legal requirement. It's a legal document as well. So they're just worth bearing in mind when thinking about the connections process as a whole. Next slide, please. First and foremost, the main one is the electrical capacity that you require, and where the nearest plug-in point is on the network. So the point of connection, they are the main influencing factor to the cost of the connection. Then you've got things that look at whether the connection on site is overhead or underground, or is it a combination of both, whether there's a substation or a suitable point on your site to house the equipment that's needed, and then if any network reinforcement work is required. But as previously discussed, it depends upon the size of your connection, the size of your scheme, to how much of that reinforcement work would be chargeable to yourselves. And obviously that would be made quite clear during the quotation and connections process. Next slide, please. It's also worth bearing in mind as well, if you are requesting a quotation from Northern Powergrid or an ICP, that the quotation is only valid for 90 days. Now, within that 90-day period, Northern Powergrid still reserve the right to make changes. However, it's more likely that if you weren't to accept the quotation within the 90 days, that there would be changes. So if you don't accept it within the 90-day period, then you need to reapply, and often the cost will be similar if you reapply quite quickly after the 90 days, but the longer you leave it, the more likely it is that those charges may change. And things which can influence those changes in the quotation cost can be things like just a change in labour and material costs, or if we've had any other connections installed on the network since you got your original quote, they can all have a bearing on the quotation cost. And it's also worth noting as well from our side, so you've got your 90 days in which to accept, but we are also have a number of guaranteed standards which are set by Ofgem, the regulator, with regards to connections. Now, there's so many of them, I couldn't possibly reel them all out to you, but in terms of the quotation itself, we have set amounts of time depending upon the type of connection that you're requesting to make that quotation to you. And if we don't, then there's a financial penalty to us, which would be paid to yourselves automatically. So they can all be found on our website, and I'm not going to sit and reel them out, but there are a number of guaranteed standards which are worth bearing in mind that Northern Powergrid do have to adhere to. Next slide, please. So once you're ready to make your quotation or your budget estimate, the next few slides are going to go into a bit further detail of the actual process of that. So what is the quotation itself? So the quotation is basically a formal offer from Northern Powergrid or from your ICP to provide you with an electrical connection. This is the price to provide that connection that you need. And the quotation will be split up, and it'll include the total price, including a breakdown of all of the costs, a description of the works required to facilitate the connection, the terms and conditions of our offer, the estimated delivery timescale, and I do stress at this stage it would only be estimated, and the details of any interactivity, so how your offer may be affected by other offers that we've already made and may be waiting for responses on. If, however, you feel that you are not quite ready for the quotation, but as has been previously discussed, you need to have an idea of the costs that you may be looking at. You can always look at requesting a budget estimate from us. These are ideal for community projects that are just wanting to find out what costs may be incurred, especially if you're applying for funding to connect the generation to your site. And the way we work out the budget estimate is we calculate it by making assumptions about the work we will need to do, and we base it on similar jobs that we've done in the past. Depending upon the size of the capacity, we can usually get you a budget estimate within 10 or 20 days. So they can be a bit quicker as well. Next slide, please. Now, the information that we need to provide your budget estimate is very similar to the information that we need when you request your quotation, just a bit less of it. So we're basically looking for the name and address of the person that's going to take the lead on the process, the site address of where you're requesting the work, a site location plan showing the site boundary and the connection point, the maximum capacity requirement that you're looking at, a summary of the electricity generation work that you're planning to do, and a summary of any equipment that's likely to disrupt the electricity supply. So anything that you may have on site that's power hungry. So things like if you have a community energy group that has a large food kitchen or a large pantry that has a lot of fridges and freezers, power hungry equipment, it's also always worth mentioning that to us. That's the type of thing that they're looking for. Next slide, please. Now, I think you've already gone into a bit of detail about this, Ahmad, but it's basically just being aware of the first comer and the second comer. So under current government legislation, if a customer known as the first comer has paid for all of the connection assets, should another customer come along, the second comer, and want to connect to those assets within 5 years of that first connection, then we are required to recover some of the costs from that second comer and provide a refund to that first comer. So it's always worth bearing that in mind, but it should be done automatically by Northern Powergrid. Next slide, please. So as a community group, you may have got your budget estimate, you've gathered together all of your information and you're ready to submit your application. It's worth bearing in mind that your installation company in most cases should be requesting the connection on your behalf. They're usually best placed to do it because they've usually done it many times before. That's not to say you can't independently submit it, but really your installation company should either be requesting the quotation or certainly providing a great deal of guidance on it. But whichever way, the quickest way to apply is to submit the application form through our website, through northernpowergrid.com. If you do need any assistance, as I've said earlier, you can contact the community energy team and we can talk you through the application process and provide you with some support on that. It does depend on the size of your project to which form you need to fill in, and we'll go through that in the next couple of slides. But the information that you will need to submit your quotation is very similar to what I said for the budget estimate. It's just a bit further information that we need in terms of dates of which you're wanting the connection to take place by, and more technical information on the types of electricity generation that you're planning on site. So it's just more detailed information that we require to carry out the quotation process as opposed to the budget estimate. Next slide, please. So as previously touched on, there's two different forms which can be filled in. The majority of community energy groups do fall into the G99, but it is worth knowing that the G98 form is also a possibility if you've got very small scale generation projects. Basically, if the installation is less than 3.86 kilowatts and only at a single premise, then there's no need for the installer to inform us prior to connection. They do need to notify us that they are connecting the equipment, but this can be done after the connection is made, and they need to fill in an installation commission and confirmation form. It's a free form, but it's something that they're legally obliged to do. If, however, they're installing a number of small-scale generation to multiple premises, we do need to know that before those connections take place, because we still might need to modify the network. So we would ask that the installer contacts us prior to that work and taking place, even if they are small scale generation projects, just so that we can check that the network has what it needs. Next slide, please. So as I've said, the G99 form is the most likely application that will be needed for community energy groups. It covers large scale generation. So if the rating of your installation is greater than 3.86 kilowatts on a single phase or 11.4 kilowatts on a 3-phase, your installer will need to make an application to us before connecting your equipment. Northern Powergrid need to agree technically with you and them about how best to connect your generation to the network. Because as previously discussed, we may need to alter the network prior to the connection. And also we recommend that this is done because the level of work that's required can be quite costly, and therefore we would always advise you have that conversation with us before purchasing any equipment. Next slide, please. There is another form which it's highly unlikely that a community energy group would need, but this covers any very large installations, extra high voltage installations, and we would always advise that you just have a conversation with our major works team prior, and they will take you through the process and discuss the project. But as I say, it's highly unlikely that a group would fall into this application. Next slide, please. So finally, there's just a few important notes from our side on grid connections. So the community energy team at Northern Powergrid, we are here to support you throughout the journey, and we're more than happy to support on all aspects of your community energy journey. In terms of connections, we don't make decisions about whether your project can connect to the grid, and we can't influence them, unfortunately, and we can't influence the cost of connection. We can, however, guide you through the process, and we can help you understand the steps. We can change engineering speak, which is often the case, the jargon that's spoken throughout the industry. We can simplify that into plain English. We can communicate with the right teams for you, and we do have access to quite a range of useful resources that we're more than happy to share with groups as well. And sometimes we can just be that step between the connections team and yourselves, and making sure that you do get to speak to the right person at the right time. Next slide, please. So if you do need to contact us, you can either come to us direct at the community energy team at northernpowergrid.com, or our connections team have their own direct telephone number and their own direct mailbox at getconnected@northernpowergrid.com. There's a wealth of information on connections on our website. And if you've got any specific way leaves, land easements, questions, you can also go into our way leaves department direct as well, and they do have their own mailbox. But again, if you're struggling with any aspect of a community energy project, please just get in touch with us and we'll certainly help where we can, or signpost you to any help that we're aware of. And that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. Very informative
you.
presentation. That was useful. Hope everyone else found useful as well. As I said before, there's also the contact information that you can use to reach out to Northern Powergrid. If you have any queries related to the connections process or community energy, I'll be sharing those along with the slides after the workshop. So now we're moving forward with very good efficiency, I must say. Now we can go into our workshop task. And here we're going to look at a scenario, a hypothetical 500 kilowatt solar farm, where you're trying to obtain a grid connection. Here you have 4 options, each with their own pros and cons. And this is a situation where there's no right or wrong answer. It's just about having a discussion about what might be the best option and why, and when would the other 3 options become more favorable. Now, originally we were going to go into breakout rooms with me and my colleagues, Reese and Elliot. However, seeing the number of attendees, I think it would probably be more beneficial if we all do it in the same room together. Yeah, as that is more about having a discussion and just to see what does everyone think. So we have 4 options here. First one is local substation reinforcement. Then you have installing a longer cable, active network management systems, and a 200 export limitation connection. So we're also about still having thoughts on how we can proceed with this. What stands out as perhaps the best option, particularly for this, for example, the scale of capacity, this 1,000 kilowatts. Do you have any ideas?
Right.
From a financial perspective.
I think the first question I would ask Ahmad is, what tariff are we getting for the export?
Interesting question, actually. Well, it depends. You're looking at agreeing a power purchase agreement with a supplier, for example, at 20p per kilowatt hour.
20p. That makes a difference to my thinking on how much I can afford to spend.
Yeah, that's a very good way to be in this, actually, because financially it's probably the single biggest factor to sway your decision in this. So if you are getting a much bigger tariff than otherwise, then suddenly it becomes more financially feasible to go through with this, and investors will be more interested in this. So with this tariff, how would you proceed, for example? Would you be looking at the best option, the most expensive option, or would you maybe be a bit more reserved with option 3 or option 4? What do you think?
When it says a 30% annual curtailment, what's the duration of that? I don't understand 30% annual.
Okay, so as you know, with A&M systems, you can export to your agreed capacity, so let's say 500 kilowatts, but 30% of the time throughout the year, you'll be forced to reduce your export. So we agreed on this tariff of, let's say, for example, 20p per kilowatt. Well, when other generators that have high priority are exporting at their full capacity, what you're doing is you're forced to reduce your export from 500 to, let's say, for example, 300 kilowatts, 200 kilowatts, for example. And this happens 30% of the time throughout the year.
Yeah, and we don't know if that 30% of the time is the winter or the summer.
Throughout the year, so both.
On and off. Okay.
So could that be coinciding when there is a lot of solar power, and therefore 30% becomes 50 or 60% in reality for the production?
Yeah.
It's actually a very good point, because what's not specified here, well, generally is the fact that your solar farm is connected, but it's not necessarily to other solar farms, if that makes sense. So other generators could be wind or hydro, for example, which not necessarily coincide at the same time. So the best time for solar is not necessarily the best time for wind. So perhaps you're at a connection point where not necessarily the highest point of solar, you're also seeing high amounts of wind energy, if that makes sense. But in this particular situation, which is assuming that where you're connected to, whether it's solar or wind or hydro, you're just seeing 30% of curtailment annually.
Yeah. Okay.
We also assuming,
So just
sorry,
go on.
we're also assuming that we've looked at all other options like offloading to a local supermarket or school or electric vehicle charging station or something like that, or a private wire or a microgrid.
Yeah, I mean, in this scenario, these are the four main options. Obviously, when it comes to real life, depending on the situation and what's around you, you can access many other options. But this is just simply four situations that you'll probably be facing when you're looking at your trying to obtain a grid connection. And all four very feasible connections. I've actually seen a project very recently where these were the four options available, actually. And it was a discussion with the stakeholders seeing what they preferred and why. So this could be a situation that comes with various things.
And you'd want to investigate whether a large battery would make it more economical to go for the low connection option.
Mm-hmm.
So if you went for option 4 with a large battery, then that may become most economical.
Yeah, well, there's certainly a lot of community energy projects where they favor local off-takers because you can typically agree a higher PPA rate and actually make it more financially feasible. And that's actually how it goes a lot of the time. However, there are some situations where there is no off-taker and it's either export or nothing. You can always install a battery. That's of course an option. Comes with its own costs, of course. It's definitely an opinion. I agree.
And
just to add a bit more about option 2, just perhaps to clarify this. When you're installing a cable, this, for example, this is 2 kilometers to an unconstrained substation, which is 2 kilometers away, which is cheaper than option 1. What you must do is you must acquire land rights, so agree with landowners when they're doing this. So while it may be a bit cheaper than option 1, for example, it could be more complicated from a regulatory or legal perspective. There's also something to think about when you're, for example, doing this in both rural and urban situations, to be honest. It's not one or the other.
I think some of it would depend on the specific situation. I know we've relied on funding that has to be spent by a certain date, so you put a bit more pressure on the timescale than even the long-term financial benefits, which might not be the right way to do it, but for a community group might be the only way. Or there might be pressure from people that have contributed to a share offer or something like that that swing the vote in one way or the other.
Okay. So interesting. So in this particular situation, with the information that you have now, what stands out as the most favorable option? And maybe to flip it, what conditions would have to change for you to think about the other options?
Can I ask another question?
Yeah, go on.
Right. Option 4 is 200 kilowatts, but it's only 30,000. Could you have the 200 kilowatts now and then apply for another 200 kilowatts later? So now you suddenly got 400 kilowatts for just 60,000.
Potentially. To be honest, I'm not entirely sure if DNOs will allow this. Typically, it's just one connection, and this often every connection, whether it's firm or non, actually causes more of a constraint on the substation. So you need to be very careful with this kind of approach. But it's outside the box thinking. That's very interesting.
I was just thinking about, you know, one developer pays the lot up front, and then another developer comes along and there's a fee, but the first developer gets a bit back.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. So we're thinking of reinforcement situation.
Sorry?
So you're thinking of reinforcement. So when you reinforce it, you pay a fee.
Yes.
And
Yes.
then within a few years, someone comes along and requests a similar connection, and then we get reimbursed back.
Yeah.
So you're saying that, again, good thinking, to be honest.
Yeah.
You're kind of hoping for that to happen for it to become more financially feasible, but it's always feasible, to be honest.
Yeah. I'm with Liz here. It's difficult to make a decision on which one I'd go for because there's so much I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. That's
don't know
kind of how it is.
You don't know if the community are going to be able to afford £600,000. I don't know if I could be confident in raising that much money from a local community to afford to do that.
Yeah, that's actually one of the biggest things you got to think about is the community must fundraise more to meet that reinforcement requirements. And it comes to think about, is it worth it? Well, is it worth to pay 600,000? So that's 3, 4, 5 times the amount of options available. But what it does is it guarantees you with the highest amount of export. So you guarantee the highest revenue out of the 4 options. And improves financially, you might get better investor support. Certainly more than, for example, option 3 or option 4, where you're perhaps lower guaranteed export, or with option 3, so A&M, as you know, you can get a high export, but it's not stable, it's not guaranteed, and that does pose a risk to some investors, fortunately.
I'm just thinking, if you're getting, let's say you get 20 pence a kilowatt hour, so 500 kilowatts is about £1,000 an hour at peak.
Sure.
You can soon get your 600,000 back at £1,000 an hour.
Yeah. You can also get that money back with option 2, perhaps option 4 as well, option 3. So what you're saying is if you can prove the financial feasibility, then option 1 is best.
Yeah. Although it's quite a long time frame, which is quite off-putting as well, because you delay everything. You know, the financial model is based on today's costs and prices are volatile.
Yeah. 24 months is unfortunately realistically even optimistic, to be honest. With the current state of the grid, constraints are everywhere, and you can get timescales of months or years to reinforcement on or a good connection. They are volatile. Hopefully this clears up in the next few months or few years with the reforms. Let's wait and see. This is probably based on right now.
And we don't know whether the constraints are local or even part of the national ones, or higher voltage constraints.
Well, the constraints in this situation is related to the local substation that you would otherwise connect to secure the power export to the grid.
Okay.
I guess the other thing you could do is, going back to the planning stage, maybe you've got more than one field that's an option. And actually, where is your field in relation to a substation? What could your connection problems be for each of the fields you've potentially got as an option?
Okay.
So taking it back, we might have more than one field.
It's interesting. Any other ideas, or maybe do you feel like it's a bit ambiguous and perhaps you need more information about the situation before you make a decision?
I think if I was talking to my group, Because our second phase in our project, we are looking to lots of solar panels on business roofs. And I think I would be looking to the long term, because when you've got panels that are in 25, 30 years, let's go for the biggest capacity we can get. And if that means waiting 2 years, we wait 2 years, but then we get maximum capacity. I think that would be what I would be saying. I'd go for option 1 if I could.
Okay, yeah. It's interesting. Does anyone have any similar situations with their current projects where they can relate to this and say, in the situation or in my situation, I go for option 1, or perhaps option 3?
What does ANM mean again?
ANM is Active Network Management Systems.
Yeah.
We mentioned this previously in the slides, but again, when I send it out, so you can have everything with you again.
Regarding sending things out,
Yes,
we were told for the previous 2 sessions that we would get the material, but nothing ever arrived. Are we going to do any better today?
I think I sent them out to you very recently. I'll get if you check your inbox. Although it's nice to make sure that you have received them. Well, you should have.
I got them this morning, Helga.
Did you?
Yeah, they came this morning.
Interesting. It took this long, but yeah. So yeah, any thoughts from Reese or Elliot on this one?
Hi, Ahmad. Yeah, I think it's more about balancing what each community group wants. I think you've kind of covered that each.
Community input is definitely a very important factor here. So, like Fiona said, if you're looking for high ambition, so you're willing to wait out that bit of extra time, but then it guarantees that you have this high export, high capacity for the 20, 25 years of the lifetime of the solar farm, then that's probably worth it. Others might think, well, it's more risky. Maybe it's not what we want. We'd like something more safe, even if it's lower capacity. We'd like to go for option 4, for example. Also very similarly realistic and feasible option.
Definitely. I think Fiona covered it well before, saying if you could, you'd go for number 1. You secure the long-term future of the system, but it does come at the highest cost. So if you could, you would, but that might necessarily not always be possible.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with that. Does anyone have any final thoughts on this? Or are all in agreement on option 1 being the best if we can go for it?
I'd say on the flip side of that, on the reverse, if there's one that's probably worse, I'd maybe lean towards option 2. Just thinking if you've got kilometers of cables cutting across all different kinds of land ownership boundaries, maybe hitting infrastructure obstacles, that sort of thing, could be in for a bit of a policy nightmare, planning nightmare, should I say. Should be very difficult to overcome some of those barriers.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
I would be for option 4 with battery, big battery.
So would you say would you go for option 4 with a battery?
Yeah. So I would then also have the advantage that I could deliver the electricity when the price is best.
Yeah. And actually, interestingly, a lot of people have your thinking. I think battery requests for a connection are the highest they've ever been at this current state in the UK, regardless of the location, Scotland, England, wherever it is. So I agree with that.
Well, it's becoming unusual to have a solar installation without battery now.
Very unusual. Financially, it makes more sense to get a battery, even if it costs a bit more. I agree. So, any final thoughts on this, or can we perhaps move on? Wonderful. So, this wraps up everything With this, we've arrived at the end of our workshop session. I really hope you found today's session beneficial, found some useful information to take away. We covered a good range of subtopics today, from how the grid operates with its different networks, what are grid constraints and how you account for them, what is required for you to secure a grid connection for your projects, and a brief look into the grid connection reforms. Just putting this here to remind everyone that this was the third of 5 workshops that we're running in partnership with the Hub. You can still sign up to the 4th and 5th workshops, which are taking place in the coming 2 weeks. The links to sign up will be in the slides, these slides, and I'll be sending these out to everyone soon, post workshop ones. In addition, we're also running these one-on-one surgery sessions, and these run till February. So everyone's also welcome to book those should you want to discuss your projects, get some bespoke advice, regardless of what stage you're at. Again, the link will be here. So this is the end. I hope you found this session beneficial. Feel free to stick around if you have any questions about what we covered today. Otherwise, feel free to hang around, leave, and thank you to everyone for attending. Do you have any questions?
Could I just reinforce the bit about sending things out? I heard that somebody had received something. I have not. Still not from the 2 previous ones. So,
yeah.
I do hope that
I'll be double checking to make sure that you have received or you haven't. Either way, what I will do is I will send them out again to you specifically, and to anyone who believes they haven't received one. So let me know in the chat, please, and I'll make sure that I'll send out all 3 workshop slide decks, just to make sure that you have received it.
Thank you.
Okay.
No worries.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question about scene rather than what we've learnt today? I don't know if anybody else has got questions about today's session before I ask that, because it's not quite as relevant.
Go on.
No, just wondering, are you the organisation that will be working with the Net Zero Hubs on delivering the sort of community engagement package of activity coming forward, or is that still to be announced?
No, so essentially these are individual programs that are handled out by the Hub, and what we're doing is we are delivering this year's workshop sessions and the surgeries, so the one-on-one sessions. We also delivered last year's workshop sessions. So the Hub kind of just varies who it partners with different programs. It just happens that we are delivering last year and this year's workshop sessions, as well as the surgeries, which are done with adjacent to it.
Brilliant, thank you. That's really helpful to understand.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ahmad. That was really good. Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Informative.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. If you have any questions, we're here to answer any. Timothy, are you still there?